My wife disappeared 7 years ago and was declared dead after extensive. I 35 am never thought I'd be writing something like this. My life has been a roller coaster of emotions over the past 7 years, but I finally thought I had found stability and happiness again. Now it feels like I'm living in some twisted nightmare that I can't wake up from. 7 years ago, my wife, Vanessa, now 34F, disappeared without a trace. We had been married for 3 years at that point. College sweethearts who tied the knot shortly after graduation. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was good. We had our arguments like any couple, but nothing that signaled the complete devastation that was to come. The day Vanessa disappeared was completely ordinary. It was a Tuesday in March. She left for work in the morning, kissed me goodbye at the door, and that was the last I saw of her. When she didn't come home that evening, I called her office and learned she had never arrived that morning. Her car was gone, her phone was off, and none of her friends or family had heard from her. I immediately filed a missing persons report. The police initially suspected me, as they often do with spouses, but they quickly ruled me out. I was teaching a class at the community college when she would have gone missing. With dozens of students as witnesses, the investigation expanded, and for months I lived in a state of desperate hope mixed with crushing fear. Search parties combed the woods near our home. Her face was on flyers, local news segments, and missing persons websites. Her parents and I hired a private investigator who exhausted every possible lead. Her car was found 2 weeks after her disappearance, abandoned at a train station 3 hours from our home. Security footage showed someone matching her description parking the car and walking toward the platforms. But the image was too grainy for positive identification, and the trail went cold from there. The most baffling part was that there seemed to be no reason for her to disappear. Our bank accounts showed no unusual withdrawals. Her passport was still at home. She'd left behind her laptop and all personal documents. We had been talking about starting a family, and just the weekend before, we had been looking at houses in a neighborhood with better schools. Nothing made sense. After 2 years of dead ends, the investigation stalled completely. After 5 years, she was legally declared dead, though her body was never found. The declaration was necessary for practical reasons. Insurance, her estate, allowing me to move forward legally. But emotionally, it was like losing her all over again. Accepting that declaration felt like a betrayal, like I was giving up on her. But the lawyers and therapist I was seeing convinced me it was a necessary step in the healing process. The grief was all-consuming. For a long time, I couldn't sleep in our bed. For months after she vanished, I kept her toiletries in the bathroom, her clothes in the closet, as if she might walk through the door at any moment. Her parents and I clung to each other at first, united in our loss and confusion. But eventually the relationship became strained. They moved across the country to be closer to their other daughter, and our contact became infrequent. My friends were supportive, but didn't know how to help. How could they? There was no body to bury, no closure to be had, just a gaping wound of uncertainty that wouldn't heal. I attended a support group for families of missing persons, which helped somewhat, at least there. Nobody told me I needed to move on or asked if I'd heard anything for the 1000th time. For the first 3 years, I lived in a kind of limbo. I couldn't bring myself to date, yet I was forced to accept that my wife was likely never coming back. I threw myself into work, took on extra classes, volunteered anything to fill the endless hours that stretched before me. I sold our house, Too Many Memories, and moved to a small apartment closer to campus. Around the 4-year mark, something shifted. I still missed Vanessa, still wondered what had happened. But the grief had transformed into something I could carry without being crushed by it. I started reconnecting with friends, saying yes to social invitations I would have previously declined. I began to feel glimpses of happiness again, momentary flashes that didn't immediately trigger guilt. 2 years ago, I met Morgan, 33F. She was a new faculty member in the English department, and we connected during a curriculum planning committee. She was smart, kind, and patient with my complicated emotional baggage. We started as friends, but gradually it evolved into something more. She never pushed me to move faster than I was comfortable with, never compared herself to Vanessa, never made me feel like I had to choose between my past and my future. Meeting Morgan felt like waking up after a long, dark night. I hadn't realized how much of myself I had locked away until she helped me rediscover joy, laughter, and hope. 6 months ago, I asked her to move in with me. Last month I proposed and she said yes. For the first time in 7 years, I felt like I was truly living again, not just existing. Then yesterday happened. I was home alone, grading papers while Morgan was at a conference in Chicago. The doorbell rang around 2 p.m. When I opened it, I felt like I was staring at a ghost. Vanessa was standing on my doorstep, looking older, but unmistakably herself. Her hair was shorter, she was thinner than I remembered, but it was her. And beside her was a young girl, maybe 6 years old, clutching Vanessa's hand and staring up at me curiously. I couldn't speak. I'm not sure how long I stood there, frozen in shock. But Vanessa eventually broke the silence by asking if she could come in. In a daze, I stepped aside, watching as my supposedly dead wife walked into my apartment with a child I'd never seen before. Once inside, Vanessa looked around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with an unreadable expression. The little girl, Emma, I would soon learn, asked if she could use the bathroom. After pointing her in the right direction, I was left alone with Vanessa. For the first time in 7 years, she sat on my couch as if she had every right to be there. As if she hadn't vanished without a trace and left me to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. When I finally found my voice, all I could ask was why. My hands were shaking so badly. I had to sit down. The story she told me was so outlandish, I still don't know what parts, if any, to believe. According to Vanessa, she had been unhappy in our marriage but didn't know how to tell me. She claimed to have felt suffocated, trapped in a life she wasn't sure she wanted. So instead of having an adult conversation about it, she meticulously planned her disappearance, creating a new identity and starting over in Canada. She said she never intended to stay away permanently. She thought she'd take a year, maybe 2, to find herself before deciding whether to return. But then she discovered she was pregnant and everything changed. She claimed Emma was my daughter, conceived shortly before she left. This is where her story completely falls apart. If Emma is really 6 years old, as Vanessa claims, then the timing doesn't add up. She would have had to be at least 2 to 3 months pregnant when she left. But we had negative pregnancy tests during that time because we were actively trying to conceive. I pointed this out and Vanessa's explanation became vague and contradictory. She mumbled something about the tests being wrong, about not realizing she was pregnant until later. But her eyes wouldn't meet mine. When Emma returned from the bathroom, the resemblance to Vanessa was striking. The same heart-shaped face, the same dimple in her left cheek. But I searched her features for any sign of myself and found none. Vanessa noticed my scrutiny and quickly sent Emma to play a game on her phone in the kitchen, just out of earshot. Then came the real bombshell. Vanessa said she had returned because she wanted us to be a family again. She had been monitoring me from afar. How she wouldn't say, and knew about Morgan. She said she expected me to end my engagement immediately and welcome her back as my wife. After all, legally, we were still married, since the death declaration could be reversed. When I refused, her demeanor changed completely. The softness disappeared from her voice, and the Vanessa I thought I knew vanished before my eyes. She threatened to make my life hell if I didn't comply. She would tell everyone I had abandoned her when she was pregnant, that I had known where she was all along, that the whole missing person case had been a cover for my own misdeeds. She would fight for full custody of Emma and take half of everything I owned. I was reeling. This woman, this stranger wearing my wife's face, was threatening to destroy the life I had painstakingly rebuilt if I didn't bend to her will. I asked her to leave, told her we could discuss this with lawyers present, but she refused to go without my promise to break things off with Morgan. Eventually, I had to threaten to call the police before she would leave. As she headed for the door, Emma in tow, she turned back with a cold smile and said I had 48 hours to make my decision before she went public with her return. The last thing she said was I was legally declared dead. Imagine how it would look if people found out you moved on so quickly after your poor missing wife returned alive and well with your child. The door closed behind them, and I collapsed onto the floor, my mind spinning. I sat there for hours, unable to process what had just happened. I didn't sleep at all last night. How could I? The wife I mourned for 7 years had returned from the dead not as the woman I had loved, but as a manipulative stranger, using a child who may or may not be mine as leverage. The life I had built with Morgan, the future we had planned, was suddenly at risk of being shattered. This morning, I called in sick to work and contacted a lawyer who specializes in family law. I have an emergency appointment this afternoon. I also reached out to the detective who had handled Vanessa's case years ago, though I haven't heard back yet. I haven't told Morgan. She's still at her conference, scheduled to return tomorrow. How do I even begin to explain this situation? Hey, my dead wife is alive and threatening to ruin our lives unless I leave you. It sounds absurd even in my head, but I know I need to tell her as soon as possible. She deserves to know what we're facing. The question of Emma weighs heaviest on my mind. If there's even a possibility she's my daughter, I can't turn my back on her. She's an innocent child caught in her mother's web of deception. But the timeline discrepancy nags at me. If Vanessa was pregnant when she left, she was deliberately keeping it from me, which contradicts our active attempts to conceive. And if Emma was born later, then she can't possibly be mine. I've spent the morning looking at old calendar entries and emails from that time period, trying to piece together a definitive timeline. Vanessa and I had been trying for a baby for about 4 months before she disappeared. She had regular doctor appointments, and we were tracking her cycles. There was a negative pregnancy test just 2 weeks before she vanished. For Emma to be mine, that test would have had to be a false negative. And Emma would have to be turning 7 soon, not 6, as Vanessa claimed. The more I think about it, the more convinced I am that Emma isn't mine. But why would Vanessa lie about this? What could she possibly hope to gain? If she wanted money, she could have contacted me privately instead of this dramatic confrontation. If she genuinely wanted reconciliation, threats and manipulation seem like a terrible approach. Nothing about this situation makes sense.